Hello, today is a special day on the channel. In my hands I have the iconic and legendary Galaxy S3 Mini that, it is hard to believe, but has been with us for over 10 years. This phone is very special to me because it was my first Android smartphone. And the thing is, it was 10 years ago in May of 2013 when I bought it for $350 with the money I had saved for months. Which is interesting because now you can get it almost for free. The thing is, when I bought my Galaxy S3 Mini, the Samsung Galaxy family had already become known within the newly flourishing Android ecosystem. The capabilities these phones had allowed you to connect with people on the other side of the globe, in addition to being able to use powerful applications and games rarely seen before, which is why these phones sold like hotcakes. Especially at the time when big leaps in specs took place only in a matter of months. And this is where the Galaxy S3 Mini comes into action. This phone was the small version of the critically acclaimed Galaxy S3. Back in 2012, not everyone used smartphones, and many people still used feature phones with small screens, so it was difficult for them to make that leap to a larger screen. Samsung saw an opportunity in all this, and with dollar signs dancing in its eyes, Samsung caught wind of an opportunity, and just like that, the idea of a compact design popular with the masses was born. Leaving history lesson behind, the S3 Mini that I have in my hands has had continuous use since I bought it. Apart from me, my mom and brother used it for years, and hence its worn-out-looking appearance. And despite all this, here we are, showing us that durability is one of its strong aspects. The phone works perfectly a decade later. Oh well, maybe not so much anymore. As you know, things have changed quite a bit since 2013, and many of the things we could do back in those years are not possible today, or are they? Anyway, in this video, we'll try to squeeze as much as possible out of the S3 Mini to see what this beast is really capable of a decade later. But before that, first, let's see what we have on the outside. On the front, we can see that huge, lagsome logo, which was the way we used to nickname Samsung back in the day because of their lovely interface. A small camera to take pictures of our sorry faces, and the home button squeezed in between the menu and back buttons. On the back, we can find the camera, the flashlight, and the speaker all together as they should be. And how not to forget the inflatable batteries it comes with. I bet your modern-ass phone doesn't have this amazing feature. The 4-inch Super AMOLED screen is one of the few aspects in which it has aged the best. When I first saw this AMOLED screen, I was blown away by its quality. My old Dell Streak 7 wasn't even close, and that tablet didn't have that bad of a screen. And sure, the resolution is not super high, but given how small the screen is, it doesn't matter all that much. What I do find incredible is that despite all the use during many years, the burn-in is minimal and it is barely noticeable. The question that I do ask myself every day is, where have all the phones that fit in your pocket gone to? Because even today, quote-unquote small phones don't go below 5 inches. And even those mini versions of flagships are going extinct. I do miss phones that actually fit in your pockets and don't get in your way when exercising, for example. And don't get me wrong, I love big phones too, but, you know, diversity is our strength, or so they say. Anyway, since we're so used to big phones now, using this phone with one hand will be super easy, and not to mention how easy it fits in my pocket. Another thing that I do miss about these old devices is how tough they were. You could literally pass a knife over them and they wouldn't scratch. I did it in my class, and my classmates were left speechless. How could you do that and not scratch your phone, they wondered. Anyway, try doing this with your modern phone and you'll see how your mouth drops to the floor the second you realize you have scratched your beloved phone. Okay, not really, but I have noticed that my newer phones do pick up scratches out of nowhere, making a screen protector necessary to avoid scratches. As you know, the S3 Mini came out at a time when Samsung was still a piece of shit. Apart from the poor customer service, they didn't even bother to update the phone. They promised an update to Android KitKat, but right at the end, they made a cheap excuse that not even their mother believed and left us stranded on Android 4.1, which is now pretty much obsolete, and support for it drops by the day. The most recent app to join that list is WhatsApp, which already stopped working in July of 2023 on Android 4.1. And due to how outdated Android 4.1 is now, if we want to use this device and get the most out of it, we'll have to update the phone ourselves using an unofficial ROM. Despite this status, these ROMs work better than the official ROM itself. In my case, I installed Android 5.1, which, for the basics, still works perfectly fine nowadays. Calls, messages, emails, etc. will work fine as long as your country still supports 3G. WhatsApp, as you can see, still works fine on Android 5.1, which is sad because without a custom ROM, you have no way to use this application, even when the phone does have enough juice to move it. And with this, I'm not saying that it's perfect either, but in general, it's way better than nothing. The latest version of Instagram Lite does work. The full version also runs here, but it's better to use the Lite one since even with this version, the performance is not ideal, but at least it can be used. And talking about the Reels, it takes some time to load, but once you get them going, they can be watched perfectly. But what if I want to listen to music, you may ask? Well, that can be done as well. We can either use the default player or download an application from the Play Store. And if you want to listen to music from the internet, Spotify also works on this phone. Although I recommend using headphones since it only has one rear speaker, which doesn't sound that bad, but the problem is it doesn't sound very loud. Now, let's talk about my favorite app, YouTube, which sadly no longer works on Android 4.1 as it now requires at least Android KitKat to run, a version that Samsung denied us. But instead of drowning in endless cry, we have a solution. As you can see, with Android Lollipop, we can still enjoy YouTube videos without video lag or any other weird issues, even at 720p resolution, which is higher than the device's own screen resolution. Navigating through the app's interface is not super smooth, but is at least usable. And we can even create, edit, and upload our own shorts to YouTube, something that few would have thought was possible on a phone this old. TikTok Lite also runs relatively well. Obviously, it won't load everything super fast, but once it does, you can watch videos just fine. There's also a bit of lag on the interface, but it'll vanish fast. To surf the web on this phone, we could use many browsers such as Edge, Chrome, Firefox, or Opera Mini. For this device, though, I recommend Opera Mini since it's the least demanding one. But for this video, I'm going to use the latest version of Firefox, which, as you can see, still runs. Demanding pages like the Apple website take a while to load, but eventually they do. I even asked ChatGPT if the Galaxy S3 Mini was still worth it in 2023. And what do you think it told me? It said, "It depends." As you can see, many of the applications that most of us use on a day-to-day basis still work. But what about the camera, you may ask? Well, the truth is, it's not one of its strongest points. Starting with the plastic lens cover that gets easily scratched, which negatively affects the quality of the photos. Aside from that, the photos are nothing to brag about, but on the other hand, they're not the worst camera I've seen either, like not even close. The results are photos with somewhat dull colors, especially in high contrast scenes and prone to motion blur in low light conditions. I have also done some panoramas and I honestly cannot say they're that bad. These results, even by 2013, were beginning to fall short compared to other smartphones of that same year, such as the Galaxy S4 Mini that came out just a couple of months later. But thanks to the powerful photo editors available today, we can enhance many of the photos we take. We are able to achieve results that go beyond mere acceptability by manually performing the tasks that modern phones accomplish automatically through computational photography. The S3 Mini is capable of recording videos up to 720p. The quality is bad, and it suffers from the same issues the photos do, such as poor color reproduction, low contrast ratio, and lots of motion blur. But hey, to be fair, at that time, the vast majority of cameras on phones that people used in 2013 were much worse than the one on this phone. And that's considering that they even had a camera to begin with. Moving on to gaming, if what you want is to play old games, most of them will run just fine. But demanding games from like 2016 and up will not run. Among the games that do work, we have GTA San Andreas. I remember when Rockstar announced this game for Android at the end of 2013, I was filled with so much excitement that I almost felt like jumping out of the window. What I was worried about, though, is that it wouldn't work. But when it came out and I installed it, I could sigh with relief since it did run, and actually quite well since we can play the game on medium graphics and get a pretty good performance. What shocked me the most at the time is to think that a game, which was previously made for consoles, could run on such a tiny device. It almost seemed like magic. And it's kind of crazy to say this, but this game, despite being full of all sorts of mods, still runs better here than on most modern phones like my Pixel 6 Pro that are incapable of opening the game, and let alone install mods since they don't even let you access the data folder anymore. It feels like Android is getting closer and closer to becoming iOS with every new update. Back in 2020, I also managed to get Free Fire to run here too, but now the game has become so much more demanding, we'll get stuck in the first loading screen. Anyway, even 3 years ago the game was quite laggy, leaving you open to getting killed at any time. A modern game that, to my surprise, does work, and very well in fact, is Clash Royale. The latest version of the game is playable. The only issue is that at the beginning of the first match, it takes a bit too much time to load, and if your opponent is a crazy kamikaze that will throw everything at you the first second, you might lose a tower. But I found a way to fix this, and that's by watching some match on TV Royale first, before you play anything. Anyway, I have to add that this game no longer works on Android 4.1, so a custom ROM like Lineage OS 12 is mandatory if you want to install the game. Moving on to emulation. Old consoles like the NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, Game Boy Advance, etc. all run perfectly as I showed in my video focused only on emulation with this phone. However, more advanced consoles like the PlayStation 1 do work perfectly if we leave everything by default. The problems, though, show up when we try to increase the resolution or enhance the audio quality. Crash Bandicoot 3 runs very well with the default graphics settings and the audio set to full sound effects. However, if we lower the audio latency, for example, it may start to stutter depending on the game. Nevertheless, the phone is capable of handling the audio with the sound effects maxed out, and I highly recommend enabling this option as it significantly improves the audio quality. Resident Evil 3, my favorite Resident Evil game, runs with all the sound effects maxed out. In 2013, I didn't know that the audio could be improved, and I played it with the audio settings by default, since the sound comes like that upon installation. Although, if we try to increase the resolution to 3x, it will start to lag. Unfortunately, there is no 2x option, which is sad since I think the phone would be able to handle that resolution. But hey, the game is perfectly playable, and that's how I completed it in 2013. Most Nintendo 64 games will run very well, like in the case of Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, or even Zelda Ocarina of Time. But as you know, Nintendo 64 emulation demands a lot more resources than the PlayStation 1, and we can find some games where performance will leave much to be desired. Games like Conquer Bad Fury that the phone will struggle a lot to move, leaving us no choice but to put the frame rate to the maximum, but even like that, the game won't be playable. Moving on to the PSP, things get even more difficult for the Galaxy S3 Mini. There are some games that will run just fine, but many others not so much. For example, this modded Dragon Ball Budokai ROM runs very well with the frame skip set to 2. It's not ideal, but we can still enjoy the game. Ben 10 Protector of Earth also requires frame skipping set to 2, which is interesting since the $1 phone I covered on the channel gave us a better performance than the S3 Mini. Unfortunately, this is not the case of Crash of the Titans. The game is so laggy we'll have issues even to move the character around, not to mention that even with the frame skipping set to max, we'll get anything remotely playable. Top PSP games like Manhunt 2, as you can see, are practically unplayable. So with all this, we can say that we have reached the ceiling of what we can emulate with the Galaxy S3 Mini. Or have we? Surprisingly, Parasite Eve: The Third Birthday is playable with frame skipping set to 2. I really didn't expect such a good performance considering that this game is one of the most recent games, and one of the few that best exploit the technical capabilities of the PSP. I thought it was going to be laggy as hell, but no, it's actually playable. The truth is that the Galaxy S3 Mini is a phone that is an all-time favorite for me. I have so many fond memories of this phone. It was with me during some of the best moments of my life, and not to mention all valuable things I learned when using it. I'm even a fan of things people criticized at the time, like the TouchWiz interface, which at first didn't convince me at all, but over time, it won me over, and now I remember it fondly, despite everything. The S3 Mini can still be used for most things with lots and lots of lag, that is, but yes, it's possible. But do I still recommend using it? Well, not anymore. But hey, I hope you really liked this video, and see you next time. Bye.